During a program of ABC Evening News, anchor Peter Jennings told viewers to look forward to next week for a special broadcast of national significance. Jennings would continue to remind viewers of the special broadcast over the next 7 nights, even referring to it at one point as the most unprecedented announcement in recent history. A week after its first mention, Jennings reminded viewers of the special broadcast one last time, asking them to pay attention later that night for an exclusive look at the greatest gift to the American people. Due to the anticipation built over the week, over 60 million Americans tuned into ABC, waiting for the evening news to end and for the special broadcast to begin. There were countless theories as to what would occur, from the announcement of alien life to the declaration of an all-out nuclear war. Speculation was brewing intensely. Once the evening news program ended, a black screen with a 10-second countdown commenced with the title DEANDEMOCRACY. Some viewers, so terrified of the threat of nuclear war, reportedly experienced nervous breakdowns and ran down the street, declaring that DEANDEMOCRACY was the code name for an all-out nuclear holocaust. Yet once the countdown ended, all fears were soon replaced with tears of joy and an excitement not seen since the end of World War II.
What are we waiting for? Let's bring them back home.
In the seconds following James Dean's presidential announcement, hundreds of thousands of neighborhoods erupted into celebration. Although other candidates had promised to end the Vietnam War, none had so accurately expressed the same anger that they had felt, which Dean had perfectly conveyed in a 15-second broadcast. Due to popular demand, the ABC Evening News was canceled the next night, replaced by a 30-minute loop of James Dean's presidential announcement. The broadcast was watched again by over 38 million Americans, and the parties continued for the rest of the week. Due to repeated assassination attempts on Robert Kennedy, the Democratic Party presidential debates were canceled for the 1968 election season. However, this proved to be no issue for Dean, as polls indicated that he was in the lead for the entirety of 1967 and 1968, despite having had fewer public appearances and rallies than any other candidate. The strength of his campaign relied on the powerful advertisements he directed that would air every Friday evening on ABC. The series of programs would be considered by many as another weekly TV series, and went on to become the highest-rated TV show on television after the conclusion of Star Trek in 1967. Although a presidential debate was eventually scheduled 2 weeks before the election, James Dean instead invited opponent Richard Nixon to a track to race cars on the same night. Although reluctant at first, Nixon eventually agreed and went to spend the entire day with Dean, reportedly even telling the actor, "To hell with it, I'm voting for you. You're already a better president than I'll ever be." This statement, although only a rumor, would spread like wildfire in tabloids and permanently curbed Nixon's chance for victory. On the morning of November 1st, 1968, 4 days before Election Day, anti-Dean groups hijacked radio channels and told civilians they were fed up with James Dean and that television was ruining American youth. After the broadcast, the groups went on to cut hundreds of power lines in the southeast, effectively preventing any of Dean's presidential ads from reaching any household below Tennessee. Dean quickly heard of the incident and, despite the risk of an assassination, flew down to the south and quickly went to work with local electricians to repair the broken power lines. James Dean would be met with a supportive crowd, primarily younger voters who were eager to see a younger face back in the White House. Elderly white conservatives, often the parents of the younger supporters, remained in their houses and occasionally peered through their window blinds to catch a glimpse of the handsome candidate. Although it wasn't known to Dean at the time, hate groups in the South had perpetuated the idea that he was Satan in disguise, and cited his good looks and his love for jazz as being clear signs of the devil.
James Dean is no man.
Elderly white conservatives in the Southeast would be the only demographic unfazed by his campaign, yet Dean continued to travel from state to state, repairing power lines for 4 days straight until the very morning of the election. On November 5, 1968, James Dean received 75% of the popular vote with 395 electoral votes. Nixon congratulated Dean in a phone call the following morning, but Dean refused to acknowledge the win and instead asked to race cars again at the track. On January 20, 1969, James Dean held his inaugural address at the official Capitol Raceway. Although presidents in the past had speeches that were typically around 20 minutes, Dean spoke for less than a minute.
I have a speech, and it has the flotsam that you people expect to hear. But that's not fair. No, that's not fair at all. I'm here for all of you. It's only fair that you speak for yourselves. My words shouldn't be louder than yours. So I brought many other guests to speak. They're just people like you and I. In the same time that many other presidents have spoken by themselves, America will speak. Thank you.
Dean proceeded to introduce many groups to the microphone, including civil rights activists and Native American families. Martin Luther King Jr. would also come forward to speak in his first appearance since an attempt on his life 9 months prior. President Dean would conclude the inauguration with a brief bongo performance and went on to race Richard Nixon at the track. In subsequent presidential inaugurations, those who disagreed with the elected president would instead celebrate DEANDEMOCRACY Day and protested by watching Dean's unique take on the address in place of the actual one. In a televised address, President Dean planned to inform Americans of his first 90 days in office. However, 6 seconds into the broadcast, the audio cut out and remained absent for the remainder of the speech. Although anti-Dean groups claimed responsibility and took pride in the sabotage, many civilians claimed that it benefited the president. The silent broadcast highlighted President Dean's sincere facial expressions and lively disposition, as opposed to the stern and stiff personalities of prior administrations. Viewers were proud to see a man in his prime at the most important position in the country. Ironically, President Dean's popularity grew after the technical difficulty, and film director Stanley Kubrick went on to call the broadcast the greatest silent film ever made.